Thank you, and thank you once again for bearing with me this morning. Thanks also to QED again for inviting BEUC on this also very important consumer issue on which we have a very strong position as well. If there is anybody new in the room that wasn't here this morning, BEUC is the European organization of consumer organizations. We represent over 40 organizations in over 30 European countries. And I really liked how Carlota finished her intervention because our perspective on this, and I want to take a step back first, not just to go straight into roaming, is what is a single market for consumers? We really applaud the initiative and the courage from the Commission to try and achieve a single market, or at least lay some measures that will deliver one in due course. And like Carlota said, this is about a borderless environment. So if you ask me, what does that mean for a consumer? That means that if I'm a subscriber of telecom services or of a data service, for example, in my country and I move to another EU country, I can still use it as if I was home, which is what we're going to be discussing this morning. But it also means that if I'm in my own country and I want to connect with a person that is in a different country, it also has to feel like if I was at home. And I say this because then, for me, roaming falls under the headline of what some have called geographically dictated rents. So it's not just about when you're on the move, but it's also when you're on your own country. And therefore, I just wanted to quickly make some comments about Article 21 in the Connected Continent proposal, about non-discrimination to provide services to consumers regardless of their member state of residence or location, but also about the fact that services that are cross-border should happen at the level of a domestic service. Now, the article might not go about the issue in the best way, and then there's a very confusing recital that gives some examples of what criteria should be considered for exceptions and so on. So I really would wonder what the real intention behind this there. But from a consumer perspective, what we would like to see is a Europe where a single market means that a consumer, I can take out my phone and call my friend and not think about whether he has a Danish number or a Belgian number, because the price is going to be cheap and it's going to be just the same as if I call my neighbor. That would be an ideal scenario, of course. Well, whether the Connected Continent proposal is achieving that or not at this stage is a different issue. And I know that there are many views in the European Parliament that want to get rid of that part of the debate for different reasons that have nothing to do with roaming. But we think it's very important, especially because MTRs are lower, there are new technologies available, there are big margins for operators in that market. We've seen statistics that it's 6 times more expensive to use a fixed line from France to call Latvia than it is to call the US. That's not a single market. And that's important, and we think it should be tackled. On roaming, as BEUC, we have been calling for the end of roaming surcharges for the past years, since the beginning, or at least for a more for a faster pace. You won't be surprised. The new market measures that are proposed by the European Commission in the Connected Continent, while they may have the right purpose in mind, the right objective, we think that are not the right approach to go about, because we wonder, are they really additional incentives to operators to decrease or abolish roaming? We have the feeling that there may be no real end in sight. It creates a sort of two-speed Europe between operators who can actually be part of these collective agreements and operators that can't. It also creates some wide exceptions, like, for example, the possibility to provide consumers with, give consumers the choice not to be part of the package, of the collective agreement, and then stay in exchange for other commercial benefits. While we understand the logic behind that, the problem is that the whole setup, the whole market-driven, industry-driven setup is really confusing. From a consumer perspective, how is a consumer going to understand whether or not he or she will have access to a collective agreement that gives him roam like at home across the entire EU, and with under what conditions and so on. So we do prefer the approach that many MEPs are suggesting in the European Parliament, where a simpler solution, we believe, is a bit more elegant maybe to go about it. It's not industry driven, sure, it's regulatory, but you say as of a certain date, roam like at home should be the norm. Now, what happens beyond that with wholesale caps and so on, it's a whole different issue, which I'm sure we'll discuss this morning. I just wanted to explain that from a consumer perspective, we would like to see Roam Like at Home being the norm in the EU, well, as soon as possible. It looks like from a legislative procedural perspective, 2016 is probably the most feasible date. If it was earlier, it would be better. But if it's 2016, then it's 2016. Now, I wanted to put other issues on top of the table, which we've been raising on this debate as well. One of them is the so-called waterbed effect, for whether it's on roaming that we're talking about or whether it's on this cross-border services, other geographically dictated rents. There is a concern that this new phenomenon of Roam Like at Home or decreased international prices could have on domestic markets. We obviously would not like to see a significant raise in domestic markets. That doesn't mean that we don't think that operators should be covering their costs. Believe me, I've gotten that question before. Of course, you should cover your costs. The problem is where we identify situations where there are 700% profit margins. Is that really legitimate? Can we do something about it? How can we deal about this waterbed effect? And Mr.
Beltrà, on this, are you aware of the situation in Cyprus? Cyprus is the country that has, I think, with Lithuania or Latvia, the lowest prices, but roaming revenues are equal to domestic revenues in Cyprus. So if you eliminate roaming revenues, they will have to double the prices. That's inevitable. So at least in a few smaller countries, the waterbed effect will be stronger and will be inevitable.
Yeah, we're not saying there shouldn't be any waterbed effect. What we're raising the issue to say, what are we doing about it? Are we really looking into it? Is the connected continent dealing with the issue in any way? And so we're more raising the question because I understand there's no one size fits all solution, but it's an important issue. There were questions that were, like this morning, there were questions that were circulated ahead of the event that I would like to answer just very quickly. Is retail data regulation needed? We think it's definitely, if we look at the levels of the different caps, especially for retail, the one that we have been denouncing the most also at the 2012 roaming regulation agreement that we thought was too high was for data, which we think remains too high, especially in a society where everybody's going digital and online and mobile more and more. Whether we prefer Roam Like at Home or not, we do prefer Roam Like at Home approach. And would decoupling enhance competition? We haven't talked about decoupling yet. I know it's a very hot topic. We don't have a crystal ball. Hopefully decoupling will enhance competition, but the question that I want to put openly is something that we also had in a public debate in the European Parliament is decoupling incompatible with a Roam Like at Home Europe? Or is it compatible? Can we envision an EU that is entirely decoupled for the roaming market, but still operators offer Roam Like at Home as a default? Or does it not make sense to have both of them? We don't have a concrete answer, but we've been putting out this question because then maybe that may be the solution out to this whole discussion about, but we're decoupling now, don't do something new. And those will be my initial remarks.